Have you ever wondered why the city that once promised endless opportunity, dazzling lights, and the ultimate urban dream now feels like a place people avoid? For decades, New York was more than a city. It was a symbol, an icon of ambition, culture, and the so-called American success story. Tourists flocked, media glorified it, and every glossy magazine cover seemed to whisper, "If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere." But step beyond the cameras, the social media highlights, and the neon glow, and the story changes dramatically. Streets that once hummed with energy now echo with a tension that residents can't escape. The subway, once a marvel of connectivity, groans under overcrowding, constant delays, and deteriorating infrastructure. Every commute is a gamble, every errand a negotiation with chaos. The dream is no longer universal. It's a selective illusion, often reserved for those with resources, connections, or the sheer resilience to endure the daily grind. High rents have long been part of the New York narrative, but the escalation is no longer gradual. It's a force that shapes decisions, uproots communities, and silently expels longtime residents. Neighborhoods once vibrant with culture and local life now feel curated for tourists or the ultra-wealthy, leaving ordinary families trapped in a relentless cycle of pressure, compromise, and compromise again. Cafes, groceries, and essential services that were once affordable touch the sky in cost, turning basic survival into a budgetary nightmare. For those who remain, the psychological weight is relentless. Stress, exhaustion, and the inability to pause or breathe freely become the new normal. Even leisure, the supposed reward of city living, is compromised. Parks feel crowded and unwelcoming. Cultural venues price out the majority, and streets that should invite exploration seem designed to drain both patience and pocketbook. The glamour sold globally masks a human reality that is both stark and deeply isolating. Families, artists, and professionals alike find themselves questioning, is the dream worth the cost? The once celebrated city that never sleeps now demands constant vigilance, resilience, and sacrifice, often without reward or recognition. Yet, despite these pressures, the city continues to market itself as vibrant, thriving, and alluring. The contrast between the image and the lived experience has never been starker. Every new building, luxury hotel, and Instagram-worthy cafe reminds residents of the growing distance between aspiration and accessibility. The glittering promise of New York, a place to live, work, and play, has quietly transformed into a landscape of exclusion, where only those who can afford the invisible toll thrive. As this gap widens, people begin to leave, seeking cities, towns, or even suburban enclaves where life is not a continuous negotiation with chaos, cost, and psychological strain. And this isn't just about convenience, it's about survival, dignity, and reclaiming the possibility of a life not defined by relentless pressure. The myth is collapsing, yet the world still looks on in awe, unaware of the human cost behind the iconic skyline. If you've felt the weight of what life in New York truly entails, it's time to speak up. Drop a comment below sharing your experiences. Whether you've lived in the city, visited recently, or just felt the pressure from afar. Your story matters because understanding the hidden struggles behind the iconic skyline is the first step toward seeing the truth no one talks about. If you're watching this and haven't yet subscribed, hit that button now. By subscribing, you'll join a community committed to uncovering the reality of urban life beyond the glossy images and social media highlights. Each like you leave isn't just a click. It's a signal that the world should pay attention to the forces shaping our cities, the stress on residents, and the unseen costs of the dream lifestyle. Engaging with this content helps the conversation grow. When you comment, like, and subscribe, you're contributing to a discussion about urban decline, social exclusion, and the collapse of what was once celebrated as the ultimate city. This isn't just entertainment. It's about documenting change, reflecting on consequences, and understanding how environments shape human experience. Think about it. How many times have you noticed the gap between the image of New York and the reality? On the streets? Share your perspective. Tell us what surprised you, what saddened you, or even what you've witnessed firsthand. Your interaction ensures these truths are seen, heard, and discussed. Imagine waking up every morning knowing that simply leaving your apartment will demand a calculated strategy, a mental map of risk, expense, and time. In New York, this is the reality for millions, where commuting, shopping, and even a casual walk in a park are exercises in endurance rather than leisure. The constant noise, relentless crowds, and pervasive sense of urgency create a psychological pressure cooker that never cools down. Residents develop hypervigilance just to navigate sidewalks crowded with tourists, delivery bikes, and the omnipresent chaos of construction. Each subway ride is a test of patience, each intersection a microcosm of tension. The mental toll isn't just theoretical, it manifests in rising anxiety, sleep disruption, and a pervasive sense of burnout. Professionals often face long commutes layered with stress from workplaces that demand high performance, leaving little space for downtime. Even weekend plans feel like obligations, a curated brunch, a must-see exhibit, or the latest trendy destination, none of it truly relaxing. The city's relentless pace turns ordinary routines into constant calculations, and the luxury of spontaneity becomes nearly impossible. Social isolation compounds the stress. Apartments are often small, shared with roommates, or prohibitively expensive, limiting private space and quiet reflection. Outdoor areas, meant to offer relief, are crowded, sometimes unsafe, or simply filled with advertisements for experiences that most residents cannot afford. The contrast between what New York promises and what it delivers creates a psychological strain unique to urban life at this scale. Residents aren't merely tired, they are exhausted by a city that commodifies attention, space, and time itself. Yet, despite these pressures, the city demands performance, visibility, and participation in a culture that glorifies busyness. Every coffee shop, co-working space, and subway platform reinforces the narrative. If you can survive here, you're succeeding. But survival comes at a cost. Mental health crises, chronic stress, and the quiet erosion of community support are becoming more common. Families struggle to maintain routines, couples navigate tension in tiny apartments, and individuals constantly negotiate personal space in a city that seems to shrink as it grows. And here lies the cruel paradox. While New York attracts millions with the promise of opportunity, the psychological environment often undermines the very potential it advertises. Ambition and creativity collide with exhaustion and constant overstimulation. Those who attempt to thrive are forced to navigate both external and internal chaos simultaneously, creating a life defined by pressure rather than fulfillment. As the stress compounds, more people start asking, is the glamour worth it? Is the city designed for humans or merely for spectacle? These questions don't have easy answers, but understanding the psychological cost is essential to grasping why so many are quietly leaving, seeking cities, towns, or suburban environments where life allows breathing, thinking, and genuine connection. In New York, working hard no longer guarantees stability. You can hold multiple jobs, climb the corporate ladder, or pour hours into creative pursuits, and still find yourself living paycheck to paycheck. The city's expenses move faster than wages, creating a landscape where effort rarely translates into security. Rent consumes the largest slice of income, often exceeding 40–50% of a household's earnings, leaving little for food, transportation, healthcare, or even modest savings. Apartments once considered attainable are now luxury commodities, and middle-class neighborhoods are rapidly converting into enclaves for the wealthy. Utilities, groceries, and basic services are priced not just for survival, but for profit, adding invisible tolls to daily life. The cost of transportation is relentless. Subway fares, ride shares, parking, and city congestion fees accumulate quietly, forcing residents to make impossible choices between commuting efficiently and maintaining a livable budget. Even something as simple as attending a cultural event, visiting a museum, or enjoying a local restaurant can feel like a high-stakes financial gamble. The invisible cost of glamour turns everyday decisions into calculations of sacrifice versus reward. Healthcare and childcare further amplify this struggle. For families, securing quality services often requires premiums that eclipse what many earn, and unexpected medical or educational expenses can destabilize months of careful budgeting. Professionals pursuing careers in finance, media, or tech may enjoy higher nominal salaries, yet they too feel the pressure. Long hours, competitive work environments, and high living costs compound stress, leaving little margin for personal growth or downtime. Even beyond finances, the psychological toll of this mismatch between effort and reward is profound. Residents internalize failure when they cannot keep up, unaware that the system itself is stacked against them. Young adults entering the city find themselves in a relentless cycle of overwork, overpay, and overstimulation, often questioning whether the prestige of a New York address justifies the constant strain. Social mobility feels increasingly unattainable, as high costs exclude even the most talented from neighborhoods, schools, and opportunities that were once accessible. The result is a subtle exodus, often invisible to outsiders. Long-term residents leave, unable to reconcile effort with survival. Newcomers arrive, enticed by the dream, only to confront the harsh economic reality. The city continues to project an image of opportunity, yet for most, the invisible cost erodes quality of life, mental health, and even relationships. The glamour is now a mask for systemic exclusion and relentless financial pressure. As these pressures compound, the narrative of meritocracy crumbles. Work hard, play hard, the old mantra, becomes a cruel irony for those trapped in the economic machinery of New York. Survival is no longer about skill or ambition. It is about endurance, strategy, and the ability to navigate a city that often values spectacle over substance. Step into neighborhoods that were once the heart of communities, alive with local culture, street vendors, and family-owned shops, and you'll find a different city today. Gentrification has swept through blocks quietly, almost imperceptibly at first, transforming familiar streets into curated landscapes of high-end boutiques, luxury condos, and cafes that cater to the affluent. Long-time residents, families who've lived for generations, small business owners who kept the neighborhood alive, find themselves priced out, their rent doubled or tripled within years. The process is subtle yet relentless. Landlords renovate, market, and increase leases under the guise of modernization, while municipal incentives encourage property redevelopment. The result? The very people who built the city's vibrancy are systematically displaced, often without notice, legal recourse, or social safety nets. Rent-controlled apartments vanish, replaced by market-rate units that few can afford. The familiar corner deli, the local laundromat, the neighborhood bar, all signs of community continuity, give way to establishments designed to attract outsiders and tourists, leaving a cultural void that newcomers rarely notice. For those forced out, the experience is more than financial. It's a psychological blow. Connections are severed, support networks dissolve, and the familiar rhythms of life are replaced by instability. Families move to the outer boroughs or entirely different cities, commuting hours just to maintain a tenuous connection to jobs and schools. Artists, educators, and service workers who once contributed to the city's character are pushed into precarity, their absence subtly reshaping the cultural landscape. This silent expulsion is reinforced by social and economic pressure. Skyrocketing property taxes, rising utility costs, and mandatory service fees make staying an act of endurance rather than choice. Even those with decent salaries feel the pinch. The cost of participating in community life, groceries, local services, leisure, is no longer proportional to income. The result is a slow erosion of diversity and vitality, leaving neighborhoods homogeneous, sanitized, and detached from the histories that once defined them. The irony is stark. While city planners and investors tout gentrification as revitalization, the lived reality is exclusion. New York markets itself as inclusive, progressive, and vibrant, yet its own policies and economic pressures create a city that systematically removes those who cannot pay the hidden tolls. For many residents, survival in their own city is no longer possible. They become invisible, their stories untold, as luxury apartments rise in their place. This process doesn't happen overnight. It's incremental, almost naturalized, and yet devastating. Streets once full of chatter, music, and local flavor now echo with silence, punctuated only by construction noise and the footsteps of wealthier newcomers. And as these communities vanish, the city loses more than residents. It loses memory, character, and soul. Walk through any busy street in Manhattan or Brooklyn, and the scene is one of frenetic energy. Honking horns, crowded sidewalks, the constant rush of commuters, delivery trucks double-parked, and tourists navigating unfamiliar corners. On the surface, it's the bustling, vibrant city people expect. But beneath the noise lies a subtle, progressive collapse of social cohesion. Chaos has become so routine that residents hardly notice the erosion of order, civility, and community. What once might have sparked frustration now blends into a backdrop, a normalized soundtrack to survival. The gradual nature of this collapse makes it almost invisible. Delays, overcrowding, and infrastructural failures no longer register as disruptions. They are simply part of the rhythm of daily life. The subway system, historically a marvel of urban transit, groans under overcapacity, frequent breakdowns, and intermittent safety concerns. Streets, once organized for efficient movement, now teem with congestion, accidents, and regulatory contradictions that amplify stress for drivers and pedestrians alike. Residents adapt, creating mental maps of safe shortcuts, alternative schedules, and contingency plans to navigate the city's unpredictability. This normalization of dysfunction extends beyond physical infrastructure. Social interactions, civic engagement, and neighborhood networks weaken under constant strain. The sheer pressure of rent, employment demands, and the relentless pace leaves little room for neighborly connection or community participation. Public spaces that could foster collective life, parks, libraries, community centers, are often overcrowded, underfunded, or co-opted by private interests. In essence, the city's decline hides in plain sight, wrapped in a veneer of urban vitality. Economic pressures intensify this invisibility. The pursuit of luxury, status, or mere survival forces individuals to prioritize personal advancement over civic responsibility. Residents rarely have the bandwidth to notice the slow erosion of safety, the decline in accessible cultural institutions, or the steady displacement of long-standing communities. Chaos is not just tolerated, it is expected, and adapting to it becomes a badge of urban competence. Moreover, the psychological effect of normalized chaos cannot be overstated. Constant exposure to stress, uncertainty, and unpredictability rewires perception, creating a city where crisis is everyday reality. Emotional fatigue sets in, and residents become desensitized to what outsiders might view as crisis conditions. Crime, overcrowding, and systemic inequities persist not because they are hidden, but because adaptation has become the default survival strategy. Yet this normalization masks the underlying fracture, the slow unraveling of social fabric, economic inequality, and civic neglect. New York appears resilient, vibrant, and dynamic, but beneath the surface, a structural and social collapse creeps forward incrementally. It is in this normalized chaos that the city's contradictions are most stark, thriving on the surface while quietly failing its residents. Step into New York's major transit hubs, and you immediately feel the tension between image and reality. Penn Station, JFK, and LaGuardia were once symbols of connectivity, efficiency, and global reach. Today, they are testaments to neglect, congestion, and systemic failure. Escalators break down, platforms overflow, and signage is confusing or outdated, leaving travelers frustrated and residents weary. What should be a fluid network that supports millions has become a daily challenge, highlighting cracks in planning, funding, and maintenance that have grown over decades. Airports amplify the city's infrastructural paradox. JFK's terminals, historically bustling with international travelers, now display long waits, understaffed security lines, and shuttered gates. Delays and cancellations are not anomalies. They are expected patterns that shape the lives of commuters, business travelers, and families alike. LaGuardia, once a showcase of postmodern renovation, struggles with congestion, parking shortages, and aging facilities that compromise both safety and experience. Even transit to and from these airports is fraught with unpredictability, whether through overcapacity buses, inconsistent subway connections, or skyrocketing rideshare fares. The subway system, New York's lifeblood, tells a similar story. Years of underinvestment, coupled with increasing demand, have created trains packed beyond capacity, signal failures, and frequent service interruptions. Weekend repairs and unplanned delays leave commuters scrambling, forcing them to plan hours in advance for trips that should take minutes. Bridges and tunnels, critical arteries connecting boroughs, face ongoing structural challenges, traffic congestion, and safety concerns, reinforcing the sense of daily struggle in a city that never stops. Public utilities further expose the systemic collapse. Water main breaks, power outages, and erratic heating or cooling in apartment complexes are no longer rare events. They are part of urban life. Residents pay premium costs for basic services while infrastructure fails to meet standards, creating frustration, risk, and inequality. The city's governance and management have struggled to balance modernization with maintenance, leaving residents to navigate daily inconveniences while the narrative of New York as a global hub persists in media and marketing. This infrastructural strain is more than inconvenience. It has economic and social consequences. Delays in commuting reduce productivity, disrupt business operations, and limit access to education and healthcare. The most vulnerable populations bear the brunt, from hourly workers relying on timely transport to families juggling multiple responsibilities across distant neighborhoods. Meanwhile, visitors encounter an experience at odds with the city's image, eroding tourism and international perception. In essence, New York's infrastructure exposes the deep fissures beneath the glamour. Airports, transit, and public services reveal a city struggling to maintain function under pressure, and the gaps between promise and reality widen each day. The decay isn't sudden. It is incremental, pervasive, and silently shapes the human experience in the metropolis. From the outside, New York gleams. Social media posts, travel guides, and marketing campaigns highlight iconic skylines, world-class theaters, luxury hotels, and trendy neighborhoods. Tourists arrive expecting the quintessential urban dream: art, fashion, nightlife, and culture at every corner. But for residents, the picture is far more complicated. What outsiders see as vibrancy and opportunity often masks a daily grind where financial pressure, overcrowding, and systemic inefficiencies dominate. Visitors experience a curated city, one designed to dazzle but not reveal. Broadway shows, Michelin-starred restaurants, and landmark attractions provide glimpses of excitement, yet these experiences are carefully packaged and priced, often excluding the very residents who maintain the city's infrastructure. The contrast creates a disconnect. Tourists enjoy spectacle, while locals endure the reality behind the scenes: high rents, unreliable transit, long work hours, and social dislocation. Even public spaces reveal this disparity. Central Park, Times Square, and the High Line offer beauty and entertainment, but navigating them as a resident involves constant awareness of crowd density, security measures, and maintenance issues. Every outing carries logistical challenges that visitors may overlook. Streets once designed for smooth pedestrian flow now teem with congestion, construction, and unpredictable activity, turning daily life into a negotiation of space, time, and energy. Economic dynamics reinforce the tension. Luxury developments, boutique hotels, and tourist-centered retail push prices upward, creating an invisible tax on residents who must compete for services and goods. The influx of short-term rentals and tourist-focused businesses contributes to displacement pressures, altering neighborhood character and community cohesion. Locals witness the city's vibrancy monetized, yet cannot participate fully, without significant cost or sacrifice. The psychological impact is equally profound. Residents develop coping strategies to navigate the gap between perception and reality, from altering commuting routines to avoiding heavily touristed areas. Meanwhile, tourists remain unaware of the structural stress, social tensions, and exclusionary forces shaping life behind the scenes. This duality perpetuates a city that thrives in image but struggles in lived experience, where the allure seen from outside contrasts sharply with the weight felt by those inside. Understanding this divide is essential. It reveals the human cost of maintaining a city that markets itself as limitless opportunity while simultaneously imposing hidden pressures on its residents. The more visitors are dazzled by surface appeal, the more the city's systemic problems remain invisible, silently shaping who thrives, who survives, and who is pushed out entirely. New York's wealth is undeniable, but it is increasingly concentrated in the hands of a few, leaving the majority struggling to maintain a foothold in the city they call home. Luxury high-rises, exclusive residential towers, and premium commercial spaces dominate the skyline, signaling success to the world while silently displacing long-term residents. This concentration of prosperity creates an invisible barrier. Neighborhoods once mixed and accessible are now gated by price, lifestyle, and opportunity. For the average New Yorker, daily life becomes a series of compromises. Grocery stores that once offered affordable options now carry prices tailored to affluent buyers. Health services, educational programs, and recreational facilities skew toward those who can pay a premium. Even cultural participation is stratified. Art galleries, theaters, and boutique events become arenas for the wealthy, leaving the rest excluded from the city's celebrated lifestyle. The visible markers of prosperity, high-end shops, luxury cars, and polished streets, contrast sharply with the reality just blocks away: overcrowded housing, struggling small businesses, and underfunded public services. This exclusion is not always explicit, but it is structurally enforced. Rising property taxes, aggressive real estate speculation, and short-term rental markets push out residents who cannot keep pace with escalating costs. Artists, teachers, and service workers, once integral to New York's social and cultural fabric, are forced to relocate, taking with them the diversity and character that once defined neighborhoods. The city's social cohesion erodes silently as economic pressures determine who belongs and who is marginalized. Even public amenities reflect this shift. Parks, libraries, and recreation centers are increasingly maintained with an eye toward safety and appearance rather than accessibility. Long-term residents find their access limited or diluted, while tourist-friendly zones receive attention and resources that prioritize external perception over lived experience. The city thrives as a symbol, but falters as a community. Psychologically, this concentrated prosperity fosters alienation. Residents feel increasingly invisible in spaces dominated by wealth, their choices restricted by financial necessity. Social mobility, once touted as a hallmark of New York's promise, now feels unattainable for many. The dream of urban success morphs into a hierarchy where privilege determines opportunity, and survival requires constant vigilance, negotiation, and sacrifice. The irony is stark. New York markets itself globally as an inclusive, vibrant, and dynamic city, yet internally, it systematically excludes the majority from participating fully. The very population that sustains the city, through labor, culture, and community, is marginalized, creating a metropolis that shines from the outside but is increasingly inhospitable to those who live within. In New York, the gap between perception and reality is maintained not just by economics, but by a pervasive culture of denial. City officials, corporate stakeholders, and media narratives often emphasize progress, investment, and vibrancy, while quietly downplaying systemic failures. Homelessness, subway breakdowns, overcrowding, and neighborhood displacement exist as footnotes in glossy reports, or are framed as temporary setbacks rather than structural crises. This collective silence reinforces the myth that New York remains the ultimate urban playground, obscuring the lived hardships of millions. Residents quickly learn the consequences of this denial. Complaints about safety, affordability, or public services are frequently met with bureaucratic indifference, vague promises, or slow-moving reforms. Community boards, city councils, and municipal agencies often operate on reactive cycles, addressing visible problems without tackling root causes. The result is a city that functions under the guise of order, while undercurrents of neglect and decay continue to shape daily life. Media coverage amplifies the disconnect. Headlines celebrate luxury developments, corporate expansions, or cultural festivals, giving the impression of endless opportunity and growth. Yet investigative reporting on the human impact, the struggles of families, the overcrowded schools, the disappearing middle class, is sparse, fragmentary, or overshadowed by spectacle. Tourists see a curated version of the city, while residents navigate a reality, increasingly dominated by exclusion, economic stress, and social disintegration. This culture of denial is self-reinforcing. As long as the public narrative projects success, investment continues in projects that enhance perception rather than improve human experience. Corporate branding, tourism campaigns, and media glorification mask infrastructure failures, social inequities, and the psychological toll of urban life. Residents adapt by normalizing chaos, yet the cost is profound. Fatigue, cynicism, and resignation become embedded in the city's social fabric. The paradox deepens. The very mechanisms that sustain New York's global image contribute to its internal strain. Silence and denial allow systemic problems to fester, accelerating social erosion while maintaining the illusion of a thriving metropolis. The city's collapse is both real and invisible, hidden behind lights, marketing, and curated narratives, making it difficult for outsiders to perceive and nearly impossible for insiders to confront openly. Recognizing this denial is critical to understanding the city's trajectory. New York continues to attract attention, admiration, and wealth, but beneath the surface, structural, social, and psychological pressures mount. The disconnect between the myth and reality fuels tension, erodes trust, and shapes a city where the human cost of urban life is often invisible to the world. New York, long celebrated as the ultimate urban experiment, now exposes the fragile reality behind the myth of the modern metropolis. The city's skyline continues to inspire awe, yet beneath the towers and lights lies a narrative of exclusion, stress, and systemic decay that few outsiders truly witness. The dream once sold, opportunity, cultural richness, social mobility, has become increasingly inaccessible, reserved for those who can pay the escalating costs or tolerate the relentless pressures of daily life. Residents witness firsthand the contradiction, a city that dazzles the world while silently eroding the quality of life for its inhabitants. The lessons are stark and extend far beyond New York. Other global cities, aspiring to emulate its allure, are beginning to face similar strains. Skyrocketing costs, gentrification, infrastructural neglect, and social fragmentation create environments where survival is measured not by ambition, but by the capacity to endure systemic pressures. What was once a model of urban aspiration now functions as a cautionary tale, revealing that growth and glamour do not inherently guarantee livability, inclusivity, or long-term stability. Tourism, once a lifeline, mirrors this paradox. Visitors encounter a city marketed as vibrant and cosmopolitan, yet many notice subtle signs of dysfunction: congested transport, skyrocketing expenses, and the invisible cost of living for those who make the city function every day. The gap between perception and reality undermines trust, reduces repeat visitation, and highlights how external success can mask internal instability. For residents, this divergence amplifies stress, fuels dissatisfaction, and prompts migration to other regions where life is more manageable. Economically, the city's concentration of wealth creates pockets of luxury amid broader precarity. The disparity is no longer an abstract statistic. It shapes neighborhoods, communities, and opportunities. Essential workers, artists, educators, and families find themselves displaced or overburdened, while infrastructure and services struggle to meet growing demands. Social cohesion frays quietly, contributing to an erosion of community and a rise in normalized chaos. The human cost of urban life, psychological strain, instability, and exclusion becomes the true measure of collapse, far more telling than GDP or skyline metrics. Ultimately, New York demonstrates that urban greatness cannot rely solely on perception, branding, or concentration of wealth. The city's decline reveals the consequences of ignoring inclusivity, resilience, and human experience. Other metropolises can learn from its trajectory. Without balance, accessibility, and investment in the everyday lives of residents, cities risk replicating this silent collapse. The urban dream, once considered aspirational, is now a fragile construct, and New York's current reality serves as a warning to all who idealize city life without accounting for the lived experience of those who sustain it. If you've watched this far, you've witnessed the hidden realities of New York, the invisible costs, the social pressures, and the subtle collapse that the city's image often conceals. Now it's your turn to engage. Comment below with your thoughts or personal experiences. Share what surprised you most. Perhaps the relentless stress of daily life, the invisible toll of gentrification, or the contrast between tourism and resident experience. Your insights help illuminate the human side of the city's story, giving voice to realities often ignored. Make sure to hit the like button if this video opened your eyes to New York's deeper truths. Your engagement isn't just a click, it's a signal that these issues matter, that understanding urban decline and the hidden costs of city living is important for everyone watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. By doing so, you'll join a community dedicated to critical exploration of urban life, social pressures, and the structural realities shaping modern cities. Subscribing ensures you stay updated on the next deep dives into the realities behind the glamour, the myths of metropolis living, and the lessons cities like New York can teach the world. And before you go, check out the next video appearing on your screen. It continues this exploration, revealing which city has emerged as the unexpected winner in this new urban landscape. Watch, learn, and continue the conversation. Your perspective matters. Comment, like, subscribe, and keep following the journey to uncover the truths of our urban world.